I begin this video about the future of the moon with a warning. For those of you lost in the past, for those of you who only care about the present, for those of you without imagination and with no interest in the future that is better and different, for those of you who do not believe in humans evolving into an even better society, for those of you who see America in permanent decline, for those of you who don't care about generations to come, do not waste your time watching this video. It is not for you who worship the status quo. This video is only for those who know there is so much more ahead of us.
The pressure of producing the speech to draw to an end the first set of manned explorations on the moon fell on Mission Commander Eugene Cernan. He had prayed that when the time came, he would find words of power and purpose. As he surveyed the lunar landscape for the very last time, he simply spoke from the heart and closed a chapter of human courage, ingenuity, and discovery.
We'd like to uncover a plaque that has been on the leg of our spacecraft that we have climbed down many times over the last 3 days. So that when this plaque is seen again by others who come, they will know where it all started. Lunar Man completed its first exploration of the moon, December 1972 AD. May the spirit of peace in which we came be reflected in the lives of all mankind.
In this series of videos about the moon, I am both commemorating the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing by humans, by Americans, July 20th, 1969, and even more, recognizing the lack of progress we in America have made in space and specifically on the moon since the last Apollo mission, December 1972. Now, finally, in 2019, there is some new interest in returning Americans to the moon, but it is far less than it should be, and mindlessly it is seen by many just as a means to then send humans to Mars, which is a destructive fantasy. What the moon is, as a singular destination for a continuous presence of Americans first and then others from around the world, to send ever more male and female astronauts of all ages, expertise, and experience to staff a bewildering variety of lunar bases, stations, and developmental projects, until one day the lunar surface and the sky above the moon is filled with an incredible collection of endeavors, both public and private, all over both sides of the moon and in the sky above it. It is a very sad commentary on the state of our government generally, and all or most of the candidates for president in 2020, that they do not have a clue about the moon. In fact, some of them see spending any resources on the moon or going back at all as wasteful. All this does is expose their ignorance. What the United States needs, and other leading countries should as well, is each construct a very ambitious plan and coordinate those plans for returning humans to the moon by the mid-2020s or earlier. Then an ever-evolving, very imaginative plan that focuses on the moon for the next 50 years, the exact opposite of what has been the case these last 50 years. Lunar development can and should power the earthly economy in ways no other single development with such power since the creation of the United States and what has transpired globally for the last almost 250 years. The moon contains a treasure of rare elements that there are only traces of on Earth, and also deposits of other valuable minerals also found here on Earth. But that is just the beginning of the moon's value. Huge solar arrays will be manufactured right on the moon and placed in such large numbers on the moon that they will not only power a lunar economy, but in the future will beam large amounts of energy back to Earth. As a launch platform of Earth satellites, and for probes deep into space, and for human endeavors far beyond the moon is a far superior launch platform than Earth because it is much lower gravity, only 1/6 of the Earth's gravity, requiring only a fraction of the fuel to launch payloads from the moon. Even more, right now on the moon, this low gravity will make the lunar surface a perfect place for all kinds of manufacturing and do so efficiently. That is now done less so on Earth, and for new manufacturing processes impossible on Earth. And medical research and medical care will also be transformed on the moon, where in low gravity operations and procedures and recovery impossible on Earth will take place. As for research generally, what we call the dark side of the moon that always faces away from Earth offers the ultimate astrological sights for telescopes that will peer deep into space in ways and with detail no earthbound or even Earth-orbiting telescopes ever will. This is the way to search for life elsewhere. As for technologies advance and our experience on the moon increase over decades, we will in the future build habitats of all kinds of purposes that will rival Earth in that they will be unique living and work environments in low gravity that will have appeal that cannot be duplicated here on Earth.
Do you think, from your knowledge of the moon, having been there, that it is going to be possible in the foreseeable future to set up scientific bases there on anything like a large scale?
Oh, I'm quite certain that we'll have such bases in our lifetime. In many ways, it's more hospitable than Antarctica might be. There are no storms, no snow, no high winds, no unpredictable weather phenomena. The gravity is a very pleasant kind of place to work in, better than here on Earth. And I think it would be quite a pleasant place to do scientific work and quite practical.
1969, Apollo 11 is go for launch.
T-minus 25 seconds and counting. We are go.
GPS go.
Guidance release 15.
After a decade of work, NASA is less than 4 days from putting a man on the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely.
What we are, what is out there, what is that moon, what is it like to walk upon it?
The Saturn V showed us that we could do it.
Standing on the surface of the moon, and you also see that amazing rocket leaving the launch pad.
This generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it.
Most of all, the incredible new source of wealth creation that will be created by and on the moon in the 21st century, involving all these uses and many more, will have its greatest and most useful impact here on Earth, much as the American economy has globally for almost 200 years. As Jeff Bezos said in an historic presentation on May 9th, 2019 in Washington, D.C., the moon is a gift like no other for all of us in human history. It is time to begin using it. By the time we in America celebrate our 250th birthday on July 4th, 2026, it should be our goal that on that very historic day that Americans will once again be standing on the lunar surface, this time to stay, and that never again in history will there ever be a time where there are no Americans on the moon. Just as July 4th, 1776 was the beginning of a new era in human history, let us ensure July 4th, 2026 is the start of an even more ambitious new era on the moon. The image of water is all important to this vision of our future. There is no substance more precious or necessary to life on Earth than water. It is essential to life itself and to the expansion of the human race throughout the Earth for thousands of years. It will be the same on the moon. On Earth, water flows, but on the moon, billions of tons of water exist as ice below the south and north poles of the moon. And water also exists in far lesser amounts universally all over the moon below the surface. All of this water is the key to lunar development, not only for humans to drink and grow crops there, but water and the hydrogen and oxygen from it will make a supply of fuel to power the lunar economy. The other essential element is simply the lunar surface itself, on which ever more complex and sophisticated lunar bases, to which first dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of women and men from every corner of the earth will come to live, work, and explore, some for just days or weeks, others for months at a time, and some for a year or more before returning home to Earth. What has been at the core of water and land here on Earth, leading the first humans out of the savannas of Africa, then across the globe to find new homes and develop the Earth, was based on both finding places where fresh water was abundant and on land they could possess and call their own. The same combination is the key to lunar development. While the moon's water resources must be resources owned by all humanity, the lunar land to which humans venture and stay must include reasonable land ownership that can be claimed in limited amounts by both nations and also individual property owners, be they companies, organizations, or individuals.
That one of the most important roles of government is to inspire and motivate its citizens, and particularly its young citizens, to love to learn, to strive to participate in and contribute to societal progress. And by that measure, NASA will, without doubt, rank in the top tier of government enterprises. The goal is far more than just going faster and higher and further. Our goal, indeed, our responsibility, is to develop new options for future generations. Options in expanding human knowledge, exploration, human settlements, and resource development outside in the universe around us. Our highest and most important hope is that the human race will improve its intelligence, its character, and its wisdom so that we'll be able to properly evaluate and choose among those options and the many others they will encounter in the years ahead. And I look forward to watching the progress and those exciting developments and hearing a status report when we gather again.
The same combination of land and water is key to lunar development. While the moon's water resources must be resources owned by all humanity, the lunar land to which humans venture and stay must include reasonable land ownership that can be claimed in limited quantities by both nations and also individual property owners, be they companies, organizations, or individuals. It will be the promise of land ownership on the moon that will be the driving force for lunar development, just as it has been on Earth for thousands of years. To own the land beneath where humans live, work, and build on the moon. That is why it will be so important that the United States take the lead in the coming years to create a series of land ownership laws for the moon that will be universally recognized and for which deeds will be issued. Logically, half of the lunar surface, but not the south and north poles, where the abundance of water is as ice. That 50% of the lunar surface must be held in common ownership by humanity for the common good forever, and that the other 50% will be subject to land claims based on a series of acceptable rules and laws. The outdated so-called Moon Treaty from decades ago, when governments and others had no interest in the future of the moon, must be replaced by an intelligent international agreement that addresses the coming potential and development of the moon. Not hinder it, but encourage it. From this perspective, we need an imaginative new funding source for the development of the moon beyond government funding. Large-scale lunar bond offerings can and will meet that need. Created by government and also large financial institutions. Bonds, not tax dollars from government budgets subject to political pressures and competing with other needs. Bonds supplying the majority of funds for lunar development along with venture capital. But very specific bonds, convertible bonds that will provide very significant amounts of funds needed to stimulate a wide variety of high-quality private ventures to and on the moon. Ventures that will have the opportunity to claim ownership of small parts of the moon they develop, accepting the lunar poles. And these bonds being convertible, if they wish, by bondholders into stock in these companies that are companies that will own acreage on the moon where they maintain a human presence. This will in fact fuel the drive to the moon and accelerate the return to the moon and our staying on the moon. The ownership of lunar land, just as it has been so here on Earth. Here again, the United States must lead the way, just as it did beginning in 1789, here in Lower Manhattan, where President Washington's appointment of Alexander Hamilton as the first Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton in the greatest achievement of his life. Hamilton was the first person in human history to understand we could, and he did, market the promise of America's future. Then a struggling, squabbling, small new nation that was near collapse because it could not fund its own government or further development as a nation. Alexander Hamilton very successfully marketed the promise of America's future as government bonds that fueled the young American economy that went on to become the most powerful economic engine in human history. It is why today, in the coming years, our government should create a new kind of bond to fuel the economy of another place with incredible, so far unrealized potential, the moon, and name these bonds in honor of Alexander Hamilton. The Hamilton Lunar bonds, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States and convertible into stock, into the various promising lunar ventures carefully chosen, that these bonds will fully or partially fund.
And in terms of this year, of course, is a wonderful celebration anniversary of the landing. And in and around the same time, NASA's made some rather sad, certainly from Australia's point of view, and I'm sure from the US's point of view, sad statements about what its plans are for the future. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I'm substantially concerned about the policy directions of the space agency, which are in fact directed by the administration. And we have a situation in the States where the executive branch and the legislative branch, the White House and the Congress, are at odds over what the future direction should be. And so they're sort of playing a game, and NASA is the shuttlecock. They're hitting back and forth as both sides try to get NASA on the proper path. So I along with many of my colleagues, have interjected ourselves into these discussions and presented our perspectives to the American people through newspaper editorials, and to the Congress through testimony and hearings, and to the administration by correspondence, that we are trying to get on the very best path here. I think that we've made some progress, but there's much yet to be done, and I'll continue to interject myself into those roles.
I believe an initial offering in the coming years of 100 billion Hamilton Lunar bonds, an offering early in the next decade, will be wildly successful and sell out if well presented and marketed, and become the catalyst to fund the coming development of the moon to benefit Earth most of all, as the driving force in the coming decades, and in doing so establish private funding of lunar ventures with this kind of early government support. Will become the formula for nations large and small to participate by encouraging others to be involved in the development of the moon, just as Alexander Hamilton's very successful American bonds beginning in the early days of the United States became the model for the entire world
Over 40
to follow.
years on, there is now an increasing appetite to return. In the last decade, Russia, China and the United States have all signalled at least some level of intention to build a future lunar base. In December 2013, the Chinese lunar exploration program even landed a robotic rover, while in April 2014, Russia reiterated its plans to inhabit the moon forever. NASA is now also running a program called Lunar Catalyst that is helping commercial companies to develop lunar transportation capabilities. Several private companies, including Moon Express and Space IL, now also have lunar ambitions. In part, are interested in the moon as a potential source of raw materials. In particular, our lonely satellite is thought to harbour substantial deposits of cobalt, iron, gold, palladium, platinum, titanium, tungsten and uranium. However, the most valuable deposit could turn out to be a gas called helium-3 that could fuel future nuclear reactors. 3 deuterium power stations do have the potential to safely fuel the world in the future. The problem is, helium-3 does not occur naturally on the Earth. It is, however, emitted by the Sun, and has been accumulating on the surface of the Moon for billions of years. Estimates suggest that there are now over 1.1 million tons of helium-3 captured in the first few meters of lunar topsoil, and that around 100 tons of helium-3 could fuel our entire planet for a year. Helium-3 is therefore worth billions of dollars a ton, so making it potentially economic to mine from the Moon, even with current space technology. To be commercially viable, any future helium-3 mining operation would have to excavate moon rock and extract the gas from it on the lunar surface. Mining helium-3, or anything else on the Moon, would therefore require the construction and operation of a significant industrial infrastructure. Such a facility could be powered by the sun and may in part be constructed from lunar materials. In fact, the European Space Agency has already funded experiments with a massive 3D printer that may build future lunar dwellings by spraying a binder onto successive layers of powdered moon rock. This would produce a very strong and thick structure that would shield its occupants from cosmic rays. To avoid the problem of transporting physical materials across 250,000 miles of space, future lunar colonies may beam pure energy directly to the Earth using either microwaves or lasers. Such energy could be generated either by nuclear power stations constructed on the Moon, or else vast solar arrays manufactured from lunar materials and spread across great swathes of a lunar surface. If this ever happens, the Moon may become the next great superpower, dependent on the Earth for some supplies, but dominating its economy.
We choose to go to the Moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there. And new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. This generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it.
We can go back. We should go back. We must go back to the moon. And this time, stay.
As far as the responsibilities of representing mankind on this trip?
That's relatively difficult to answer. It's a job that we collectively said that was possible and we could do, and of course the nation itself is backing us, so we just sincerely hope that we measure up to that.